I'm Miles, this is Elliott Motorworks, and today we're going to blind the innocent.
Well, not exactly, but I am going to show you how to install auxiliary lighting, and that's some knowledge you're just going to have to be responsible with, folks. In my case, we're going to use Hella 500 fog lights, and we're going to control them with an OEM switch from the interior. I'm going to be mounting these on my bull bar, which came with mounting points specifically for an application like this. The Hella kit comes with just about everything a basic auxiliary lighting installation calls for, including lights with light covers, a relay, a decent, if not entirely unremarkable 2-position switch, solder-on connectors, and some crimp-on and splicing connectors, you know, if you're into that sort of thing, and all the wiring you'll need. I also picked up a factory Toyota fog light switch, I believe meant for a forerunner of a similar vintage. If you wanted to pick one up yourself, the part number is 00550-35976. And finally, one more thing before we start our installation, an add-a-circuit kit from Little Fuse. This kit says the circuit's good for up to 10 amps, which should be enough for our purposes. I'm not going to put in any of the boring stuff like soldering on connectors or anything like that, rather we're just going to jump right into installing this kit onto your vehicle. Well, my vehicle, and in this case, a 2001 Toyota Tacoma. Start by disconnecting the battery since we are working with electronics and we don't want to short anything out. Just the negative side should do fine. Since the location of our relay will determine a lot about our wiring, we're going to start by figuring out where to mount the relay. I think this bracket holding our brake fluid sender to the firewall is probably a great location for it. It's held in place by a 10mm bolt which should come out pretty easy. The bolt does have a washer on it that you won't want to lose, so be careful with that. Checking the bolt for its fitment with our relay, I can see that it's just a little bit too thick, so the hole in our relay is going to need to be expanded. To sort this out, I've decided to use a hole file, which has a rough, abrasive material on the outside and tapers as it comes to the point. With a little bit of elbow grease, working this file back and forth now has the bolt fitting pretty much perfectly. And now, we're ready to put the relay back on the firewall so we can start figuring out our wiring. Since the hole this bolt goes through is made of plastic, you're gonna want to be careful when you tighten it down. I did cause mine to have a slight split, but it should be fine. If your relay does get a split like mine, just make sure that when you plug in the wiring harness, you're supporting the relay too so that you don't break it off. Now we can take our rainbow rat's nest of cables, drape them over the fender, and figure out what we're gonna do about all this wiring. The black wire splits a few feet from the end and will be used to provide power to our lights up front. The yellow wire is going to be what joins our relay to our switch and actually allows you to turn on the current to the lights. That goes into the cabin and connects to the back of the switch. The blue wire is our relay's ground and can be attached to pretty much any bolt that disappears into the frame or firewall. Our red wire is going to connect to the positive terminal on the battery, which will provide the current that you're switching using this relay. Below its mounted location on the firewall, there's a grommet that I'm going to use to pass the yellow wire into the cabin. While it was hard to find a good angle of approach, using something sharp I was able to stab through a small hole that I could then pass the yellow wire through. Back in the cab, I've removed the trim below the steering column, which is really just a matter of taking out any screws or bolts you can see. Turning to where we're going to mount our switch, you can put it pretty much anywhere. I'd recommend mounting it somewhere near the fuse panel so that if you're using a switch circuit like me with the ADA circuit, you won't have to go too far. I'm going to put my switch in this area where my truck didn't come with some kind of option. The trim blank basically explodes out of the dash at the slightest touch. We're going to feed the yellow wire up through the hole and connect it to the back of the switch. We should be connecting this to our relay terminal, which I marked earlier with an R on the switch. I also have a G for ground and a P for power. It's an asymmetrical shape, so it should be pretty hard to get wrong, but just in case you're using this video as a reference, if you're holding the switch so that the pilot light is on top of the fog light icon, then these labels should be accurate. Our blue wire that you see there is going to be the ground for the switch. I found the best place to mount it was right here, where a bolt that we took out for the dash goes into a metal frame under the steering column. But again, you could mount it pretty much anywhere you see a bolt disappearing into the frame. Now it's time to run a power wire to our switch. This is where the ADA circuit comes in. I've opted to piggyback off a 15 amp fuse that's switched with the accessory circuit. That means I'll be able to use the fog lights when my key is in accessory or further position, but not when the vehicle is off. I connected the ADA circuit to the power terminal of the switch using a bit of green wire that came in the kit. I'd hold off on pushing your switch back into the dashboard until you've had a chance to test it, but this is basically what we're working with. Back on the front of the truck, we're ready to start mounting the lights so we can start figuring out their connections. They fit into place pretty much without incident, but if you need some, the kit does come with washers to help space things out. Each light is going to have 2 wires coming out of it. One of the wires is going to be blue, and that, again, is a ground. The other wire is black, and the black wire connects to the power coming from the relay. In the case of our wiring harness for this relay, that's the black one that splits a couple feet from the end. I'll connect those with some Lucas bullet connectors that I've soldered on, and I'll ground the lights to some bolts that go into the frame using some grounding connectors. Once all your wires are hooked up, it's a good idea to zip tie them out of the way. You might want to wait until you've tested it first, but I already know that it works because I edited the video. If you're a major rock crawler or off-road person, then you're definitely going to want to find a more permanent solution for your wiring, but for now, this will do fine for my purposes. So, with all that out of the way, it's time to put our key into the accessory position and give our lights a test. If you flick the switch and nothing happens, you have a bad connection somewhere. It's probably with either the power or the ground to your switch. Using a multimeter, you can check for continuity and figure out where a connection isn't being made. In this case though, the lights are shining bright and beautiful. And naturally, the effect is even more dramatic at night. I installed fog lights, which project low and shouldn't blind any oncoming motorists. But just in case, I'm going to take this opportunity to remind you to adjust your lights after you've installed them. You seriously don't want to be that guy in the truck blinding everyone else with your new lights. If the tutorial helped you out or you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to ask in the comments. Thanks for watching.